The apartment was nothing special. A two-bedroom place on the third floor of an aging building in downtown Portland, with creaky hardwood floors that groaned every time. You walked across them and radiators that clanked like someone was banging on pipes in the middle of the night. The paint was yellowing in the corners. And there was a persistent smell of old carpet that no amount of air freshener could completely mask. But it was affordable. And in a city where rent prices climbed higher every year, that counted for everything. I found Jake through a roommate finder app. His profile was straightforward. 23-year-old guy. Works in construction, pretty chill, looking for someone to split rent with. No drama, no mess, just someone reliable. His photo showed a guy with sandy brown hair, a crooked smile, and what looked like perpetual stubble. He was wearing a flannel shirt and holding a beer, the quintessential image of casual masculinity. When we met to discuss the apartment, I was immediately struck by how easy he was to talk to. Jake had this way of making you feel comfortable, like you'd known him for years instead of minutes. He laughed easily, made terrible jokes about the apartment's quirks, and seemed genuinely excited about having a roommate. "So, you're a graphic designer?" he asked, leaning against the kitchen counter during our walkthrough. "Yeah, mostly freelance work." "Web design, some branding stuff for small businesses," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The truth was, I was barely scraping by, taking whatever projects I could find while building my portfolio. "That's cool, man. I can barely use Photoshop to resize a photo," he laughed. "I'm more of a hit things with a hammer until they work kind of guy." We both laughed. And just like that, I knew we'd be living together. What Jake didn't know, what I made sure no one knew, was the secret I'd been carrying since I was 14 years old. The secret that made me carefully edit my stories, monitor my expressions, and always keep a part of myself hidden away. I was gay. And in that moment, watching Jake joke about the broken tile in the bathroom, I made a decision that would shape the next year of my life. I would keep that secret buried. Jake seemed like a great guy, but he also seemed like the kind of straight, sports-loving, beer-drinking guy who might not understand, who might make things awkward, who might look at me differently. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't risk losing the first apartment I could actually afford, or the first potential friend I'd made since moving to Portland 3 months ago. So I smiled, agreed to split the rent 50-50, and began building the walls that would keep Jake Morrison at a safe distance from the truth. Living with Jake was surprisingly easy. He was neat without being obsessive, considerate without being overbearing, and had a schedule that complemented mine perfectly. He left for construction sites early in the morning, usually around 6:30, which meant I had the apartment to myself during my most productive work hours. He'd come home around 5, tired and often covered in sawdust, but always in a good mood. We developed a comfortable routine. Jake would shower off the day's work. Then we'd sometimes cook dinner together or order takeout and watch whatever game was on TV. I learned about football, which I'd never understood or cared about before. And Jake learned to appreciate the design work I showed him on my laptop. "Wait, you made that?" He'd say, genuinely impressed by a logo I'd created or a website I'd designed. "That's actually really cool, Alex." Those moments made me happy in a way I hadn't expected. Jake's approval meant something to me, though I tried not to examine why too closely. He talked about work constantly. Stories about his coworkers, the projects they were building, the problems they encountered. His best friend from the construction crew, a guy named Marcus, showed up occasionally with beer and pizza, and they'd sit on our worn couch. Watching games and arguing good-naturedly about plays and players, Jake dated too. There was a string of girls over those first few months, though none seemed to last more than a few weeks. Sarah, the barista from the coffee shop down the street. Emma, who worked at the gym he went to. Melissa, who I never actually met but heard about extensively. "I don't know, man," Jake would say, sprawled on the couch after another date that didn't lead anywhere. "They're all great, but something's always missing, you know." I'd nod sympathetically, offering the kind of relationship advice I'd picked up from movies and TV shows. Never from actual experience. Because while Jake was out on dates, I was alone in my room, carefully constructing the persona of a straight roommate who just happened to not be dating anyone at the moment. I'd mentioned being interested in women occasionally, making sure to be vague enough that I never had to actually produce a girlfriend, but specific enough that Jake wouldn't question it. It was exhausting, this constant performance. Every word had to be measured, every reaction carefully calibrated. When Jake walked around the apartment shirtless after his shower, water still beating on his broad shoulders, I had to make sure my eyes didn't linger. When he asked why I never brought anyone home, I had to have excuses ready. Just focusing on work right now, I'd say. Or, dating scene in Portland is tough, man. Jake would accept these explanations easily, never pushing, never questioning. And I'd feel both relief and a strange, aching loneliness. The truth was, I was deeply, painfully lonely. I'd moved to Portland to escape my small hometown to find a place where I could maybe, possibly, eventually be myself. But fear had followed me here, settling into my bones like winter cold. The fear of rejection, of violence, losing the fragile stability I'd managed to build. I'd joined a few LGBTQ+ groups online, lurking in forums and chat rooms but never participating. I'd driven past gay bars downtown but never went inside. The closest I came to any kind of authentic connection was late at night, alone in my room, chatting with strangers on dating apps that I'd delete the next morning out of paranoia. Jake would never find out. I'd make sure of it. Things started changing around month 4. It was subtle at first. Jake began spending more time at home, less time out with Marcus or on dates. He'd come home from work, and instead of heading to his room or out with friends, he'd knock on my door. "Hey, you want to order Thai food and watch that documentary you mentioned?" Or, "I'm about to make some pasta. Want some?" Or, "Come on, take a break from work. Let's go grab a beer." I'd usually say yes, because how could I not? Jake's attention was like sunlight, warm and encompassing, and I found myself drawn to it even as alarm bells rang in the back of my mind. We started talking more, really talking. Not just surfacely vile roommate chat, but deeper conversations that stretched late into the night. Jake told me about growing up in a small town in Wyoming, about his complicated relationship with his father, who'd wanted him to go to college but couldn't understand why Jake preferred working with his hands. About his younger sister, who was the first in their family to get a degree, and how proud he was of her. I told him carefully edited versions of my own stories, about growing up in suburban Ohio, about parents who loved me but never quite understood my interests, about feeling different in ways I couldn't quite articulate. I told him true things, just not the whole truth. "You ever feel like you're not showing people who you really are?" Jake asked one night. We were sitting on the couch, the TV playing some late-night show neither of us was really watching. He had a beer in his hand, his third of the night, and there was something vulnerable in his expression. My heart stopped for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he shrugged, looking down at his beer bottle. "Like people see me, and they see this? Construction worker guy who likes football and beer. And that's true, but it's not all of it, you know. Sometimes I feel like I'm playing a part." "Yeah," I said softly, the word barely more than a whisper. "I know exactly what you mean." Jake looked up at me then, and something passed between us. A moment of recognition, of shared understanding. Then he smiled, that easy, crooked smile that made something in my chest tighten. "Glad I've got you to talk to, man. You're a good friend." The word should have felt safe, comfortable. Instead, it felt like a cage. Because somewhere along the way, without meaning to, without wanting to, I'd started developing feelings for Jake Morrison. Real, complicated, terrifying feelings that went way beyond friendship. I noticed everything about him now. The way he'd run his hand through his hair when he was thinking. The sound of his laugh, deep and genuine. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. How he'd absently touch my shoulder when he walked past. Casual contact that sent electricity through my entire body. It was torture. Living with someone I was falling for, someone who could never feel the same way. Someone who thought I was straight, who trusted me as a friend. Who had no idea that every casual touch, every late-night conversation, every moment of closeness was carving me apart inside. I tried to create distance. I'd work longer hours, hide in my room more, make excuses to not hang out. But Jake would just knock on my door. concern in his voice. Hey, you okay? You've been kind of distant lately. Yeah, just busy with work. I'd lie. Okay, well, I'm here if you need to talk about anything. You know that, right? And God, how I wanted to talk. How I wanted to tell him everything, to stop performing, to just be honest for once in my life. But fear always won. Fear of losing him, fear of making things awkward, fear of what might happen if the truth came out, so I kept my secret. And I kept falling, and I told myself that this was sustainable, that I could manage these feelings, that everything would be fine. I was wrong. The night everything changed started like any other Friday evening. Jake had come home from work in a particularly good mood. His crew had finished a major project ahead of schedule, and his boss had given everyone a bonus. He'd stopped by the store on the way home and picked up steaks and beer, ingredients for what he called a celebration dinner. Come on. Alex, you're taking the night off, he insisted, practically dragging me away from my laptop where I'd been working on a logo design. We're grilling, drinking, and I'm not taking no for an answer. So we went up to the roof of our building where someone had set up a few old chairs and a rusty grill that tenants could use. The sun was setting, painting the Portland sky in shades of orange and pink, and Jake was in his element, joking around while he managed the steaks, beer in hand. You know, this is nice, he said, settling into a chair next to me while the meat cooked, just hanging out, no pressure, no expectations. This is what life should be like. Yeah, I agreed, taking a sip of my own beer. It is nice. I mean it, though, Jake continued, and there was something serious in his tone that made me look at him. You're one of the best friends I've had, Alex. I know we've only been living together for a few months, but I don't know, man. It feels like longer. In a good way. My chest tightened. You're a good friend too, Jake, he smiled. That crooked smile that I'd come to know so well, and clinked his beer bottle against mine. 2 good friends and cheap rent. We ate dinner as the sky darkened, talking about everything and nothing. Jake told me about his plans for the weekend, a hiking trip he was thinking of taking. I told him about a potential new client I was pitching to on Monday. Normal, easy conversation between 2 friends, except I couldn't stop noticing details. The way the fading light caught in Jake's hair, the sound of his laugh echoing off the rooftop, the way he looked at me when he talked, like I was the only person in the world worth listening to. I was falling harder, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. We went back to the apartment around 9, both of us pleasantly buzzed from the beers. Jake suggested a movie, and I agreed, settling onto the couch while he queued up some action film on Netflix. But halfway through, Jake's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, then stood up. So, man, Marcus is having some kind of emergency with his girlfriend. I should probably go make sure he's okay. No problem, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. Go be a good friend. Jake grabbed his jacket and keys, then paused at the door. Don't wait up. This might take a while. Marcus can be dramatic when he's drunk. Be safe, I called as he left. The apartment felt emptier once he was gone, the way it always did. I tried to go back to the movie, but my mind was elsewhere, tangled up in thoughts of Jake and feelings I couldn't express, and a future that felt impossibly complicated. I needed to do something, anything. To clear my head, that's when I made the mistake. I pulled out my phone and opened one of the dating apps. I kept hidden in a folder buried deep in my phone's home screen. I'd been talking to a guy named David for a few weeks. Nothing serious, just chatting. He'd been asking to meet up, and I'd been putting him off. Too scared to take that step, but tonight, feeling lonely and reckless and tired of hiding, I agreed. We messaged back and forth, making plans to meet at a coffee shop the next day. Just coffee, I told myself. Nothing major. Just a chance to maybe, possibly, connect with someone who knew the truth about me. The conversation felt good, freeing in a way I hadn't experienced in months. For 20 minutes, I didn't have to pretend. I could talk about being attracted to guys, about my fears, about what it was like to live in the closet. David was understanding, funny, and kind. I was so absorbed in the conversation that I didn't hear the apartment door open. I didn't hear Jake's footsteps in the hallway. Didn't realize he was there until his voice made me jump so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Hey, sorry. I forgot my Jake stopped mid-sentence. He was standing in the doorway of the living room, and from where he stood, he had a clear view of my phone screen, the dating app, the messages, the profile picture of David, the unmistakable male name at the top of the chat. Time seemed to stop. I watched Jake's eyes move from my phone to my face. Saw the confusion, then the realization, then something I couldn't quite identify flicker across his expression. "Alex," he said slowly, "is that ... Are you?" My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribcage. My hands were shaking. Every instinct screamed at me to deny, to lie, to make up some excuse about a friend's phone or a joke or anything other than the truth. But when I opened my mouth, what came out was, "Jake, I can explain," which was, of course, the worst possible thing to say, because there was nothing to explain. He'd seen it. He knew, after months of careful hiding, of calculated performances, of building walls to keep him from knowing who I really was. Jake Morrison had accidentally discovered my secret, and I had no idea what would happen next. Jake stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. His expression was unreadable, a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't identify. "Marcus is fine," he said finally, his voice strange and distant. "False alarm. I forgot my wallet." He walked past me into his room, grabbed his wallet from his dresser, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he was going to leave without saying anything. Maybe we could pretend this never happened, go back to the way things were. But Jake stopped at the door again. He stood there with his back to me, one hand on the doorframe, and I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Jake," I started, but my voice cracked. He turned around. "Are you gay, Alex?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading since the day we moved in together. I could lie, but what would be the point? He'd seen the evidence with his own eyes. "Yes," I whispered. The word felt enormous, terrifying. It's like jumping off a cliff without knowing how far the fall would be. Jake's expression didn't change. He just nodded slowly, processing. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" I repeated, confused. "That's it? Just okay? I mean, what do you want me to say?" Jake asked, finally moving away from the door and sitting down in the armchair across from me. He looked tired suddenly, like the weight of this revelation was exhausting. "Do you want me to be angry? Upset? What do you need from me right now, Alex?" Tears were burning at the corners of my eyes, which I hated. I didn't want to cry in front of him. I don't know. I'm sorry. "I should have told you, why didn't you?" Jake's voice wasn't accusatory, just genuinely curious. "We've been living together for 4 months. I thought we were friends." "We are friends," I said quickly. "That's why I didn't tell you. I was scared of this, of things changing, of you looking at me differently." Jake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen him do 100 times when he was thinking. "How am I supposed to look at you, Alex? You're still the same person. You're still the guy who makes terrible coffee in the morning and leaves his laptop charger all over the apartment. This doesn't change who you are, but it changes how you see me," I said, and the tears were falling now, hot and humiliating on my cheeks. "You probably think I've been lying to you this whole time. That I've been ... I don't know, looking at you or something. Thinking things I shouldn't. Have you been?" Jake asked, and there was something in his voice I couldn't identify. I froze. This was dangerous territory. "Have I been what?" Looking at me. Thinking things. The question felt like a trap, but I was so tired of lying. "I've never done anything inappropriate," I said carefully. "I've never invaded your privacy or made you uncomfortable. I've just ... yeah, I've noticed you. Because you're an attractive person. But I've never acted on it or expected anything from you or Alex." "Breathe," Jake interrupted, and there was almost amusement in his voice. "You're spiraling." I took a shaky breath, wiping at my eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm handling this really badly. We're both handling this badly, Jake said with a slight smile. I just found out my roommate is gay by accidentally seeing his phone, and instead of just talking about it like a normal person, I asked weird questions and made you cry. This is not my finest moment. Despite everything, I laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, but it was a laugh. This is such a disaster. Yeah, Jake agreed. It kind of is. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension slowly bleeding out of the room. Jake was looking at me, really looking at me, and I couldn't read his expression. Finally, he spoke. Can I ask you something? And I want you to be honest with me. Okay, I said nervously. Why were you so scared to tell me specifically? Did I do something? Say something that made you think I'd react badly? I thought about it, trying to find the right words. No, I said finally. You've never said anything homophobic or given me any real reason to think you'd be an asshole about it. I made assumptions. You're this straight guy who likes sports and construction work and dating girls. You have this whole life that seems so normal and easy. And I'm this guy who's been hiding who he is since he was a teenager, who moved to a new city to escape high. Past, who can't even be honest with his own roommate. I was scared that you wouldn't understand. That you'd see me as different, as less than. Jake's expression softened. Alex, I don't think you're less than anyone. And my life isn't as normal and easy as you think it is. Everyone's got their stuff, man. We're all just trying to figure it out. But this is different, I insisted. This isn't just stuff. This is who I am. This is something that changes how people see me, how they treat me. I've lost friends over this, Jake, family members. I've been called things I wouldn't wish on anyone. So yeah, I was scared to tell you, because losing you as a friend, losing this apartment, losing the one stable thing in my life right now, that felt worse than just keeping it hidden. Jake was quiet for a long time, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. I'm not going to kick you out, Alex. And I'm not going to stop being your friend. This doesn't change anything between us. Well, maybe it changes one thing. My heart sank. What? You don't have to lie anymore, Jake said simply. No more making up excuses about why you're not dating. No more carefully avoiding certain topics. No more pretending to be someone you're not. At least not with me. You can just be yourself. Whoever that is. The relief that washed over me was so intense it was almost painful. Really? Really? Jake confirmed. He stood up, walked over to the couch, and sat down next to me. Not too close, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. Look, I'm not going to pretend I understand everything you've been through. I'm a straight white guy from Wyoming. I've had it pretty easy in a lot of ways. But I know what it's like to feel like you can't be yourself. Maybe not for the same reasons, but I get it. And if you need someone in your corner, someone you don't have to perform for, then I'm here. Okay? Okay? I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Jake. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I might, he said softly. We sat there for a while, not talking, just existing in the same space with this new knowledge between us. The movie we'd been watching had long since ended, Netflix cycling through to some random suggestion. The apartment was quiet, except for the familiar sounds of the buildings settling around us. Finally, Jake stood up and stretched. It's late. I should probably get to bed. But hey, tomorrow, if you want to talk more about any of this, I'm around. Or we can just act like everything's normal. Whatever you need. Thanks, Jake, I said again, because I didn't know what else to say. He headed toward his room, but paused at the doorway. And Alex, for what it's worth, I'm glad you told me. Well, I'm glad I found out, even if it was by accident. No more secrets, right? Right, I agreed. No more secrets. But even as I said it, I knew I was still keeping the biggest secret of all. The one I could never tell him. That I was in love with my straight roommate. The next few days were strange. I woke up Saturday morning expecting everything to be different. For the atmosphere in the apartment to be awkward or tense. But when I emerged from my room, Jake was in the kitchen making breakfast like always. And he greeted me with the same easy smile he always had. Morning. Want some eggs? he asked, like the night before had never happened. Sure, I said, still uncertain about how to navigate this new dynamic. We ate breakfast together. Talking about Jake's plans to watch a game later in my upcoming project deadline, it felt ... normal, which was disorienting in its own way. You're being weird, Jake observed, pointing his fork at me. Stop being weird. I'm not being weird, I protested. You're totally being weird. You're treating me like I'm made of glass or something. I know you're gay, Alex. I'm cool with it. Can we just move on? I laughed, some of the tension leaving my shoulders. Yeah, okay. Moving on, and we did, mostly. Over the next week, we fell back into our usual routine, with a few notable differences. I didn't have to be as careful anymore about monitoring what I said or how I reacted to things. When Jake mentioned an actor was attractive, I could agree without carefully disguising it as an objective assessment. When he asked about my dating life, I could be honest about the fact that I wasn't really dating anyone, but was on apps occasionally. Jake, for his part, seemed genuinely interested in this part of my life he'd been shut out from. He asked questions, not invasive ones, but genuine attempts to understand. So like, when did you know? He asked one night while we were watching TV that I was gay. I don't know, middle school maybe? I didn't want to know it. Didn't want to admit it even to myself. But yeah, I knew pretty young. It must have been hard, Jake said thoughtfully. Being in middle school is terrible for everyone, but having to hide something like that on top of it, ... It wasn't fun, I admitted. High school was worse. College was a little better, but I still wasn't really out. Portland was supposed to be my fresh start, the place where I could finally be myself. But then I got here and just kept hiding anyway because it felt safer. Is it safer? Jake asked. Hiding, I mean. I thought about it. In some ways, yeah. People can't reject you for being something they don't know you are, but in other ways, it's the loneliest thing in the world. You're surrounded by people but completely alone because nobody really knows you. Jake was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Well, I know you now, so you're not completely alone. It's a simple statement made my chest ache in a way that was both painful and sweet. Thanks, Jake. By the second week, things had settled into a new version of normal. Jake went back to his usual routine of work, the gym, and hanging out with Marcus. I went back to my design projects and my careful dance of existing in a world that still felt hostile more often than not. But something had shifted between us. Something subtle but significant. We were closer now, more honest with each other. Jake would tell me about his dates and ask for advice, and I could give it from a more genuine place. I'd tell him about the guys I was chatting with on apps, and he'd look at the profiles and offer his own opinions. This guy seems boring, he'd say, scrolling through some profile I'd shown him. All his pictures are gym selfies. Does he have a personality? I don't know. That's why I'm chatting with him. To find out? Well, you can do better than gym selfie guy next. It was nice having someone to talk to about this part of my life. It made me feel less alone. But it also made my feelings for Jake more complicated, because now that I didn't have to hide, now that I could be more authentic around him, I found myself falling even harder. Every kind word, every moment of understanding, every time he went out of his way to make me feel accepted, it just made me love him more. And that was a problem, because Jake was straight. He'd made that clear in 100 different ways, from the girls he dated to the way he talked about attraction. He was supportive of me being gay, yes. But that didn't change who he was attracted to. I tried to manage my feelings, to appreciate the friendship we had without wanting more. But late at night, alone in my room, I'd lie awake thinking about him. About the way he laughed, the way he looked at me sometimes with such genuine affection, the way it felt when he'd casually touch my shoulder or ruffle my hair. I was in love with someone who could never love me back, and knowing that hurt in a way I couldn't adequately describe. The next complication came in the form of Marcus. Jake's best friend had been around the apartment more frequently lately, and he'd started asking questions about me that made me nervous. So, Alex, he said one Friday evening when he'd come over to watch a game with Jake, you seeing anyone? It was an innocent enough question, the kind people asked all the time. But coming from Marcus, with Jake sitting right there, it felt loaded. Not really, I said carefully. I've been pretty focused on work. Man, that's what Jake always says. Marcus laughed. You two are going to end up old and alone if you don't get out there more. Jake caught my eye and smiled. And there was something conspiratorial in the look, like we were sharing a private joke after the game. When Marcus was heading out, he pulled Jake aside in the hallway. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls in our apartment were thin, and I heard every word. Dude, what's up with your roommate? Marcus asked. Is he gay or something? My blood went cold. Yeah, Jake said simply. He is. Why? Seriously? And you're cool with that? Why wouldn't I be? Jake's voice had an edge to it I'd never heard before. Alex is a good guy. His sexuality doesn't change that. I guess, Marcus said, sounding uncertain. It's just, doesn't it make things weird? Like, does he look at you in the shower, or whatever? Jesus, Marcus, no. He's not some creep. He's just a dude who happens to like guys instead of girls. Can you get your head out of the dark ages for 5 seconds? There was a pause, and then Marcus spoke again, sounding chastened. Sorry, man. I didn't mean anything by it. If you're cool with it, I'm cool with it. It's not about me being cool with it, Jake said firmly. It's about treating people with basic respect. Alex is my friend. That's all that matters. When Jake came back into the apartment, he found me sitting on the couch, trying to pretend I hadn't just heard the entire conversation. He sat down next to me heavily. Sorry about Marcus, he said. He can be an idiot sometimes. It's fine, I said, though my hands were shaking slightly. People have assumptions. It's not your job to educate everyone. Maybe not, but he's my friend, and he should know better, Jake said firmly. He looked at me, concern in his eyes. Are you okay? I know that kind of thing can be hurtful, even when it's not directed at you specifically. I was surprised by his perception. I'm okay. And thanks for standing up for me. You didn't have to do that. Of course I did, Jake said, like it was obvious. You're my friend, Alex. I've got your back. The words warmed something inside me, even as they reminded me of the fundamental barrier between us. Friend, that's what I was to him. And that's all I could ever be. But it was still more than I'd had a few weeks ago. It was still something worth holding on to. 3 weeks after Jake discovered my secret, I went on my first actual date with a guy. His name was Daniel, and I'd met him on an app. He was a teacher at a local elementary school, had kind eyes and a soft smile, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We'd been chatting for a while, and when he suggested meeting for dinner, I'd said yes before I could talk myself out of it. I was nervous getting ready, changing my shirt 3 times and obsessing over my hair in a way I'd never done before. Jake noticed, of course, and poked his head into my room. Date? He asked with a grin. Just a date, I said, tugging at my collar. I don't know if it'll be hot or not. Tell me about him, Jake said, leaning against the doorframe, so I did. I told him about Daniel, about how we'd connected over a shared love of design and art, about how he'd made me laugh during our conversations. He sounds great, Jake said, and he sounded like he meant it. You should go for it, Alex. You deserve to be happy. Thanks, I said, meaning it. Then, because I couldn't help myself, I asked, Does my hair look okay? Jake laughed and walked over, reaching out to fix a strand that was sticking up. His fingers brushed against my forehead, and I had to suppress the shiver that ran through me at the casual touch. There, perfect, he said. Now go knock this guy's socks off. The date with Daniel was nice. He was as kind and interesting in person as he'd been in our messages. We talked easily over Italian food, sharing stories and finding common ground. He was out to his family and friends, comfortable with himself in a way I envied. He touched my hand across the table at one point, and it felt nice, if not electric, but all night. I couldn't stop thinking about Jake's sub-CRIB to my channel.